Hello heroes, and welcome to another astonishing episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is brought to you in part by Patreon supporters. If you'd like to vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel, you can sign up for $1 per month over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelate. The link is in the description below. Cassandra Eleanor Lang was born in Oyster Bay on Long Island to parents Scott and Peggy Ray Lang. Scott was a talented electronics technician, but when he failed to find legitimate employment, he turned to burglary to support his family. This inevitably broke the family apart as Peggy left and Scott was caught and arrested. While Cassie was only 4 years old, Scott was sentenced to 5 years at Rikers Island. During this time, Cassie was looked after by her Aunt Ruth and Uncle Carl, Ruth being Scott's sister. Some reports claim that Scott received parole for good behavior after only 3 years, while other sources indicate that he spent a full 5 years in prison. In either case, Peggy divorced her husband, but let Scott keep custody of Cassie. Because of his electronics expertise, the prison warden set up a job opportunity for him, an interview with Stark International, and soon Scott Lang was working under Tony Stark himself. By all accounts, it was a good enough life, and Scott was a loving and attentive father. Cassie, meanwhile, was an outgoing, tomboyish girl who loved superheroes. She also enjoyed cooking and had a habit of being, experimental with her recipes. But one day, tragedy struck when a 9-year-old Cassie suddenly fell ill. It turns out she suffered from an inoperable and potentially fatal heart defect. As the days passed, Scott used his savings and salary advances in a desperate attempt to stem the tide of mounting medical bills. Then he learned of a doctor named Erica Sondheim who pioneered a new form of laser surgery that could save Cassie's life. Scott went to meet with Dr. Sondheim only to find her being abducted from her institute and taken away. Pursuing her captors, he followed them to the headquarters of Cross Technological Enterprises, or CTE. He began plotting to break in and retrieve her, but he knew he'd need a good crew to get him inside. For that, he would need funding and, out of desperation, decided to break into a seemingly empty house in an affluent neighborhood. But it turned out that this home belonged to Dr. Henry Pym. Sure, I don't need to belabor this point too much, but Pym was a scientist who developed a size-changing formula, as well as a cybernetic helmet which could control insects, most notably ants. Using these, Hank Pym fought crime as the superhero Ant-Man, and alongside his partner, the Wasp, became a founding member of the mighty Avengers. Over the following years, Pym used several different identities, including Giant Man, Goliath, and Yellow Jacket, leaving the name Ant-Man behind along with a costume which was found by Scott Lang. Thinking this could be the solution to his problem, Scott stole the old suit for himself. He subsequently infiltrated CTE's headquarters and encountered their grotesquely mutated CEO, Darren Cross. You see, Cross suffered from a degenerative heart disease and was implanted with a nucleo-organic pacemaker. While this saved his life, as a side effect it caused his circulatory system to enlarge, making him 8 feet tall and super strong. But in addition, the strain it caused on his heart forced him to require regular transplants. Dr. Erica Sondheim was captured to perform these transplants using organs harvested from abducted homeless people. And when Scott, as Ant-Man, attempted to rescue Sondheim, he was captured by Cross, who intended on using his heart instead. However, Sondheim had already implanted Cross's old heart back into his body, causing him to go into cardiac arrest and allowing both her and Scott to escape. And fortunately, her laser surgery was able to repair Cassie's heart and save her life. Shortly after, Hank Pym arrived at the hospital as Yellow Jacket and Scott surrendered to him. However, Pym was impressed by Lang and allowed him to keep the costume and continue operating as Ant-Man. He also began a lasting friendship with the Lang family, and Cassie referred to him as her Uncle Hank. Cassie also befriended Dr. Sondheim and other associates of her father, including Tony Stark himself, who she also referred to as an uncle when she was younger. Cassie also had friends closer to her own age, like Denise Pithens, the daughter of another Stark employee, Artemis Pithens. She lived with her father in a Nassau County suburb on Long Island, and while Scott tried to hide his moonlighting as Ant-Man from Cassie, she secretly figured it out. She also sneakily began stealing small doses of his size-changing Pym particles, but they seemed to have no effect on her. After the corrupt executive, Obadiah Stane, succeeded in taking over Stark International, Scott left the company and moved to Chula Vista in California with Cassie. There, he started a company of his own, Electro Lang Incorporated. The family remained allies with Stark, and Ant-Man occasionally aided Iron Man. There were also smaller misadventures, like when Cassie accidentally dropped her grandmother's diamond ring down the drain, and Scott secretly went on an ant-sized journey to retrieve it. There were also times when his superheroics caused some issues, like when a battle with the villainous Goliath forced Scott to miss a school play that Cassie was starring in. When Cassie was 11 years old, her father was hired by the Fantastic Four, and the two of them moved back to New York. While there, she developed an innocent crush on Christophe Vernard, the 12-year-old heir of Dr. Doom who'd had Doom's knowledge and memories artificially implanted in his mind. It was also during this time that Scott found out that Cassie knew he was Ant-Man. Scott also donned a new Ant-Man costume designed by young Christophe. However, Cassie's romantic interest in the boy started to wane after she saw him in his exoskeletal armor that made him look like Doom. One day, one of her classmates, a boy named Donald Halberg, came to 4 Freedoms Plaza, then the headquarters of the Fantastic Four, seeking help. While the FF were unavailable, Cassie offered to talk to her father, but Donald insisted that he wouldn't understand. Christophe, who Cassie assumed was a proper member of the FF, offered to help, but when he revealed that there were areas of the building that were off limits to him, Donald ran off, not wanting to get in trouble. Cassie followed after him, and the two ended up playing a game of soccer while Christophe watched. But Donald fell while playing, and Cassie noticed that his back was badly bruised. The boy refused to explain or talk about it and ran away once again. Following this, Cassie noticed that Donald had been ditching school. Christophe suggested they interrogate him until he revealed the truth, but Cassie insisted that what he needed was help. Fortunately, she was able to convince him to confide in a teacher about how his father had been abusing him. While Donald and his mother moved into a shelter, his father began going to counseling. It was shortly after this that Cassie seemingly first encountered Kang the Conqueror, a time-traveling supervillain from the far future. In truth, this was merely a phantom created by the psionic monster known as Onslaught, but served as Cassie's introduction to Kang nonetheless. We don't need to get into the details of the Onslaught incident today, but the important thing is that the Fantastic Four seemingly sacrificed themselves alongside the Avengers to defeat him. They were reborn in a pocket dimension and the heroes eventually returned, but for the time being the people of Earth believed them dead. Naturally, the apparent end of the Fantastic Four also meant the end of Scott's employment at 4 Freedoms Plaza. Cassie bid farewell to Christophe with an innocent kiss on the cheek and advised him not to spend as much time in his armor. Following this, Scott was hired by Oracle Inc. to join the corporate incarnation of the Heroes for Hire. During this time, Cassie was attacked and absorbed by the android known as the Super Adaptoid. Fortunately, with some encouragement and guidance from her father, Cassie was able to shut down the Adaptoid from within and free herself. After the Heroes for Hire disbanded, Ant-Man started regularly aiding the Avengers, but nothing he faced as a superhero compared to the dread he felt when Cassie was scheduled to go to a party with a boy wearing a midriff-bearing shirt. Although she did make him some spaghetti before she left, even though she was only 11, I guess sometimes she was the one taking care of him. Initially, Scott planned on using his Ant-Man powers to follow and spy on her, but ultimately decided to trust her and let her have a good time at the party. But things soon changed again when Cassie's mother Peggy got engaged to a cop named Blake Burdick. While she never wanted custody of Cassie before, she began seeking it here. And because Scott was regularly seen alongside the Avengers, Peggy was awarded custody for at least a full year. Scott moved into Avengers Mansion, and while Cassie was able to be there on the weekends, she wanted to stay with her father. While living there, Scott sometimes feuded with another Avenger, Jack of Hearts. Unable to fully control his energy generation powers, Jack had to spend 14 hours every day sealed inside an isolated room, undergoing a painful process to siphon off excess radiation and prevent him from exploding. This left him short-tempered, and after he accidentally mutated his teammate, the She-Hulk, Jack was removed from active duty. Cassie, meanwhile, continued to look up to her father and the Avengers. She did not get along well with her stepfather, Blake, whose poor opinions on both superheroes and ex-cons left him disdainful of Scott. But then one day Cassie was accosted by a stranger, a man named Charles Cooley, who claimed to be looking for his daughter Jessica. In truth, Cooley was a child killer who'd murdered his own daughter and decided to do the same to Cassie. Fortunately, he was quickly discovered, and Scott soon arrived to save his daughter. After the killer shot him in the arm, an enraged Ant-Man nearly executed Cooley, but Jack of Hearts arrived on the scene to stop Scott from doing something he'd regret in front of Cassie. When Cooley tried again to take a shot, Jack fired an energy burst that destroyed both the gun and the hand holding it. With his time almost up before he needed to return to his isolation chamber, Jack instead took the killer and flew up into the atmosphere, where both of them exploded. When Cassie asked her father who that was, he simply told her that it was an Avenger. But this would not be the last time that Scott Lang saw Jack of Hearts, and soon a day came that would go down in infamy as the Avengers' darkest moment. Stricken with grief by the loss of her own children and empowered by an energy source known as the Life Force, Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, went mad and launched a series of attacks on her own teammates, the Avengers. The first of these, before anybody had any idea what was happening, was when a seemingly resurrected but undead-looking Jack of Hearts appeared on the grounds of Avengers Mansion. Scott went to investigate and confront Jack, but as he did, his former comrade burst into a fiery explosion, wrecking the mansion. Scott himself was nearly vaporized in the blast, and Ant-Man was dead. Thanks to Doctor Strange, the Avengers discovered that Wanda's reality-warping powers were the cause of this disaster and several others. The Scarlet Witch was subdued and turned over to the custody of her alleged father, Magneto, after which the House of M incident happened, which is a whole other story. In the wake of these tragedies, the Avengers disbanded, and the details of what happened were never released to the public. Months later, a 14-year-old Cassie Lang was still seeking answers and tried to contact Tony Stark. She skipped school to go to Stark Industries multiple times, but her mother found out and followed her there. Even after Stark agreed to speak with Cassie, Peggy and Blake pulled her away. This led to an argument that involved Blake insulting Scott, Cassie shoving Blake, and Peggy slapping her daughter. Now, she did ultimately learn of what happened with Jack of Hearts, but was told it was an accident. That night, she planned on running away from home, but on her way out the door, she learned that there was a new group of teenage heroes and decided to find them. These young Avengers included a Hulkling, the son of the Kree Captain Marvel and a Skrull princess, Patriot, the grandson of Isaiah Bradley, the Black Captain America, Wiccan, originally called Asgardian, the reincarnated son of the Scarlet Witch, and Iron Lad, the time-traveling younger version of Kang the Conqueror. It was actually Iron Lad who assembled the team to defend himself against his own future self. You see, in one of his schemes, Kang attempted to give his technology to his own younger self and jumpstart his villainous career. But the younger, more innocent Kang, henceforth known as Iron Lad, refused and fled. Knowing that Kang would pursue him to ensure his own existence, Iron Lad attempted to find the Avengers but had landed in the time period in which they were disbanded. And so instead he gathered a group of next-generation heroes, and thus the Young Avengers were born. Cassie took notice of the team after they rescued a group of hostages during a wedding. In that incident, they were aided by one of the guests, a talented young woman named Kate Bishop. And so in the aftermath, Cassie found Kate at the hospital to question her. She learned which direction the Young Avengers went after the fight at the cathedral. Knowing that was towards Avengers Mansion, Cassie checked there next, and Kate went with her. And upon getting onto the grounds, Cassie found the spot where her father died. She told Kate that she planned on finding her dad's equipment and using it to take his place. But before they could go inside, the girls were confronted by the Young Avengers. This led to an argument between her and Patriot, and Cassie demonstrated that she'd been practicing self-defense. Things began getting heated as Cassie insisted that she wasn't leaving without her father's gear, and without realizing it, she soon grew to giant size. It seems that the Pym particles that she'd been exposing herself to for years had finally taken effect, giving her the ability to change her size just like her father and Uncle Hank. However, she wasn't used to her power yet and soon lost consciousness. Fortunately, Captain America, Iron Man, and Jessica Jones were investigating the Young Avengers as well and helped her shrink down. Inside the ruins of the mansion, Tony brought Cassie up to her father's old room where she claimed one of his costumes. However, his helmet and technology had been put into storage. Tony also told her the full truth of what had happened with the Scarlet Witch, and he begged her not to follow in her father's footsteps, not wanting her to share his fate. But soon after, the mansion was attacked by Kang's android servant, the Growing Man. And soon Kang himself arrived, intending on returning Iron Lad to his proper place and time. Cassie tried to save him, displaying her ability to shrink as well as grow, and in the heat of the moment, a romance began to blossom between the two teenagers. Joining forces to protect their ally, the Young Avengers battled Kang the Conqueror together, with Kang, or at least that particular incarnation of Kang, ultimately being killed by his own younger self. However, by changing his future, Iron Lad was causing damage to the time stream that altered reality around them. He was ultimately forced to return to his home time and forget what had happened, so that events could unfold the way they were meant to, including him becoming Kang. He left behind his armor, which became a new version of the android Vision thanks to scanned brain patterns from Iron Lad and the operating system from the original Vision. This teenage incarnation of Vision later took the name Jonas, so for clarity we'll refer to him as that here. Taking the code name Stature, Cassie continued to fight alongside the Young Avengers against the wishes of both her mother and the elder heroes. Now, we don't have time this week to go into too much depth on Cassie's exploits as Stature, but let's hit on a few of the highlights. For example, while Jonas had inherited Iron Lad's feelings for Cassie, she was initially unaware of this. His loneliness was worsened seeing Cassie get along well with the cyborg Victor Mancha while the team was fighting alongside his group of young heroes, the Runaways. After the passing of the Superhuman Registration Act, Cassie and the Young Avengers joined Captain America's underground resistance against that law. But after a battle with Iron Man's pro-registration forces, Cassie switched sides. She joined the government's initiative program, wanting to fight villains and not other heroes. During this time, she got into a scuffle with Eric O'Grady, the irredeemable new Ant-Man, when he continually insulted her father. Despite being on opposite sides of the Civil War, Jonas still had feelings for Cassie. He spoke with her by posing as Tony Stark and meeting with her at an initiative training camp. He took her to a diner where he assumed Iron Lad's appearance and asked her to come with him. However, they were soon both attacked by agents of Advanced Idea Mechanics. Despite an accident causing them to be stuck together, the two young Avengers successfully repelled their attackers. After escaping and separating from one another, Jonas confessed his feelings for Cassie and kissed her. However, she was still unsure about how she felt and needed time to work things out. Things also continued to be difficult at home as Cassie often clashed with her stepfather Blake despite being a government-sanctioned hero. Then one day she got into another battle with Kang's Growing Man. While Cassie was victorious, Blake was helping civilians get to safety, and when the Growing Man fell, it fell on top of him. Blake was badly injured, and Cassie, devastated by the stress this had caused her mother, ran back to the Young Avengers. She nearly shrank away to nothingness in her shame, but Patriot helped her regain her confidence and get back up. Cassie subsequently left the initiative after it was taken over by Norman Osborn, the corrupt politician who had once been the Green Goblin. In addition to being Young Avengers, she and Jonas joined a version of the Mighty Avengers led by her Uncle Hank. This incarnation of the team seemingly included the Scarlet Witch, who'd been missing since the House of M incident, but this was actually the trickster god Loki. While they didn't discover her true identity, Cassie and the Young Avengers did help expose the fake Wanda as a dangerous imposter. The Avenging Children subsequently went on a crusade to find the real Scarlet Witch, one that led them to the Balkan nation of Latveria, the home of Doctor Doom. You see, the Young Avengers had realized that Wiccan and another teammate they'd recruited, Speed, were Wanda's reincarnated children. Since the loss of her twins was what caused her to attack the Avengers in the first place, Cassie hoped that by showing her that they were still alive, Wanda would restore her father. They eventually tracked her to Latveria, but Wanda had lost her memory and was engaged to Doctor Doom. Furthermore, the adult Avengers wanted to stop the Young Avengers, Wolverine wanted to kill Wanda, and the whole scene erupted into chaos. And to complicate matters further, Iron Lad then arrived on the battlefield. A version of Iron Lad that still had his memories and his armor and had come from the future to help. While Cassie was overjoyed to be reunited with him, this was yet another awkward moment for Jonas. The Young Avengers and the Scarlet Witch then escaped the chaos when Iron Lad brought them into the time stream and jumped backwards in time. They arrived at Avengers Mansion before it was destroyed, and Cassie was reunited with her father. However, they soon realized exactly what point in time they were in when a reanimated Jack of Hearts appeared on the grounds. The Young Avengers quickly escaped when Wanda's memories and powers returned. She brought them back to the present along with Scott so that he could also avoid the blast. Soon after, Wanda returned to Doctor Doom, wanting to be rid of the power that drove her mad to begin with. When Wanda attacked the Avengers, she manipulated reality so easily because she had tapped into an energy source called the Life Force with help from Doctor Doom. However, when the ritual to sever her connection to this power was interrupted, Doom was able to claim it for himself, growing gigantic and powerful. This led to another large battle in which the Avengers, the Young Avengers, and the X-Men all joined forces against Doctor Doom. During this battle, Ant-Man was seemingly crushed by Doom, causing Cassie to grow larger than ever to attack him. However, it seems that Stature was no mite for the empowered Doom, who struck back, fatally injuring her. Furthermore, it turns out that Scott had actually survived Doom's attack. And so while Wiccan and Wanda were able to combine their magic to depower the villain, Cassie Lang died in her father's arms. Iron Lad then insisted that he take her body into the time stream with him. When Jonas and the others expressed their reservations about this, Iron Lad attacked, killing the teenage android and demanding to take her. It seems that in this moment he really did start to become Kang, but in the end he gave up and left. Now, this is not the end of Cassie Lang's story, but it would not be Iron Lad who ultimately brought her back. Sometime after all of this, a spell was cast that inverted the alignments of many heroes and villains. One affected by this was Dr. Doom, who wished to atone for the sins of his past. To accomplish this, he tried again to claim the reality-altering power of the Scarlet Witch, but succeeded only in capturing enough energy to right one wrong. And so he decided to undo the damage he'd done to the Lang family and restored Cassie to life. One day Scott heard a knock on the door, and there was his little girl, alive once again. While she retired her Stature identity and was no longer a member of the Young Avengers, she eventually formed a new costumed identity and adventured alongside her father as Stinger. If you want to see the full story on how that happened, you can read the Astonishing Ant-Man series, which ran in 2015 and 2016. And if you made it all the way to the end of the video here, let me know in the comments and tell me who your favorite Pym particle user is. Is it Scott or Cassie? Maybe Bill Foster, one of the Wasps? Or is it Hank Pym himself? Let me know in the comments. But that's all I've got time for this week. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, share the video, and subscribe for more marvelous content. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me, including my Patreon page, where for only $1 a month you can get your name in these special thanks here. So until next time, true believers, Excelsior!